Hello, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It is Tuesday, November 29th, 2022. I'm your host, George Kurt, joined by the one and only Cody Roadcap. Cody, how you doing here today?
I'm doing good. To quote one of my favorite artists, is the Chainsmokers. I am the sick boy. So I apologize for my. I don't even know how to describe what my voice sounds like right now. So if you make it all the way through the episode listening to me, I just want to know I appreciate you a little bit extra this week.
Yeah, we're both feeling a little under the weather, but we know we have to come out and give you guys all the info you need on the Week 13 waiver wires. That's one of the things we're going to be covering on today's show, as well as hitting the many NFL news and notes that we had for this week, doing a little fun quotes of the week segment, and previewing the Thursday night football game for Week 13 between the Bills and the Patriots. Make sure you find us on thecouchgms.com and our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at thecouchgms, and join our Discord chat to talk to us whenever you'd like, 24/7. The link is in the description of the video or podcast you're watching or listening to. All right, Cody, why don't we jump right into NFL news? So last week we got the news that Melvin Gordon was released by the Denver Broncos after some fumbling issues and potential debacles in the locker room. Anyway, he was just signed on Monday to the Chiefs practice squad. So we know the Chiefs are kind of in a little bit of a transition in their running back room. Not exactly sure Melvin Gordon's going to be the guy that's like activated off the practice squad and plays right away, but there's always a chance.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a chance he gets activated. It might not be this week, but Pacheco. There was a lot of hype coming in during the preseason for him. He's had about 3 weeks now as being the quote unquote number one guy, and it's not that he hasn't done anything with it, but he hasn't, put a hold on that job that it can't be taken from him. They got Ronald Jones involved a little bit for the first time, not heavily, but he was involved for a little bit for the first time this season this past week. So getting Melvin Gordon, who still has some talent, yes, there is the fumbling issues. Maybe it'll be a change of scenery. It'll now be his third AFC West team, so we'll see if he can sign with the Raiders next season to complete the full. I don't even. I lost my train of thought of where I was going with that one. But the Chiefs also signed a wide receiver, Brian Edwards, who was a promising rookie for the Raiders, that went to Atlanta and is now on the Chiefs, and that's another position they need. So probably not guys that you have to run out and add to your roster, but Melvin Gordon might be an interesting name, especially for a late playoff push, or as we get into the playoffs, might be like a sneaky ad for your NFL playoff challenge.
Very true there. And I know like I'm in a very deep keeper league where I actually never cut Melvin Gordon last week. I never really had to. Now I'm probably going to hold on to him for a week or two, see if he's activated. If he's not activated and doesn't play at all, there's probably no point to hold on to him. But if he is and starts getting some snaps, you never really know. Pacheco's 22 carries for a nice 69 yards and a touchdown. Eh, kind of very mediocre when you look at it that way. So we'll see if he can keep getting the ball rolling as he is really getting the starter snaps now, but not much to see there. We can move on to the quarterback news. Deshaun Watson is officially activated to the 53-man roster, and he will start for the Browns against his former team in the Houston Texans this week. So a little bit of a rivalry game as we go into, I should say, revenge game as we go into his return. I'll just ask you right off the bat, we're probably going to have to definitely talk about this more later in the week. Is he somebody you're looking at to throw right into your lineup in a good matchup if you are desperate for a quarterback in fantasy?
No, I'm not. I'm not throwing. It's been a while since he played. I mean, remember he didn't play at all last year either. Um, the Texans are bad, and he might have something to prove. The Texans might also have something to prove. Like this could be a game that gets very interesting, and even taking it a step further, like Jacoby Brissett the last couple of weeks has been playing really well. Like I don't know if the needle moves, especially this week, that much for Deshaun Watson. It might even take a step back until he gets more acclimated back into it. So it's not like I'm giving a huge boost this week to like Amari Cooper or a Donovan Peoples-Jones, a guy we might talk about in a little bit. You know, this move isn't as big as I thought it was. The first couple weeks of the season, like when Jacoby was not playing the best, but he's come along, looked really good, helped lead him to a comeback win over the Buccaneers. He's played great in the last month or so. So I don't know how big of the needle they actually moves with Deshaun Watson re-entering the lineup this week.
When it comes to Deshaun Watson specifically, I'm with you. I would try to avoid him if you can help it. There's probably some other waiver wire quarterbacks that are a safer bet to go with this week. But I think if not right away, I definitely could see a boost to the Browns offense coming with Deshaun Watson. Like I get it that Jacoby Brissett's been playing well recently, but he's still Jacoby Brissett. He hasn't really shown that much in his career. So the odds of him being that breakout 30-ish, I don't exactly know how old he is, 30-ish year old quarterback that really all of a sudden turns into somebody who is boosting players around him seems kind of unlikely to me. So I think it's probably more likely that, Amari Cooper was playing well and boosting him, or Donovan Peoples-Jones might be starting to have a bit of a breakout, or the fact that their run game is so dominant that teams have to respect that and have to stack the box for Nick Chubb. Like, Deshaun Watson, I think, has to give some kind of a boost. Maybe it won't be right away because he does have to get back up to speed. But I get 100% where you're coming from.
Yeah, and I think, and I don't typically like to speculate on like the locker room and stuff like that because I'm not in the locker room. So this is just from an outsider looking in. Jacoby Brissett was given a game ball for one, his performance uh, on Sunday, but also being the ultimate team player. Like, and when he was given the ball, like you saw the celebration, like the guys love him. And you
Mhm.
have to wonder now with Deshaun Watson coming in with all the baggage that we don't need to get into. You've heard it by it now. You know what comes along with Deshaun Watson. Like, how does that also hurt the locker room, the team chemistry, and stuff like that? And we're couch GMs. When you play Madden, if you're
Mhm.
winning, if you're doing different things, there is a teammate boost, like that'll affect your overall for your individual players. The way the team has rallied around Jacoby the last couple of weeks, I think all the players got the teammate boost. So I am very interested, and we'll have to see how this plays out, not just this week, but the next coming weeks. Like, does all his teammates buy in with the Deshaun Watson, or is there just like the fans? Is there people in the locker room that are like, I really just can't get behind this guy, like, for what all the off the field stuff. So it's definitely an interesting case. We've never seen anything like that, and hopefully we don't ever see anything like it again. But definitely will be interesting, especially coming down in terms of fantasy. Like fantasy playoffs are starting. Watson might be a potential league winner that you can get off the waivers still this week. Um, or he could be a guy that is overhyped and looks like he hasn't played for 2 seasons.
It's very true. It could go either way. For anyone out there that doesn't understand the whole teammate boost thing, like it has happened in the past, and I hate to target Carson Wentz not once but twice, but we've seen it now twice. Once when he was in Philly, after his MVP year, he came back from his injury. He was not playing super well. He then came down with another injury that I think was a legitimate injury, but the team picked up again when Nick Foles came in at starting quarterback. And then this year in Washington, when he was injured again, and all of a sudden Washington's on a ridiculous looking win streak now with Taylor Heineke, who's another guy that has that great morale and the locker room really does work around. So that kind of thing is possible, and it's something I hadn't thought of in this case, but maybe.
For sure. But like you said, we'll have to wait and see how this plays out. But we had a couple injuries, nothing major to any superstars in terms of fantasy, but definitely a lot of, your middle tier guys, which are just as important in fantasy. Starting off with another unfortunate injury for Elijah Mitchell. He is now out again for 6 to 8 weeks with a knee injury. Another MCL sprain, tough season for him. He was looking good with uh, his coming back the last 2 weeks, filling in some relief for Christian McCaffrey. He had a big touchdown that was called back on probably the second worst holding call of the season. The one in the Packers game against Elton Jenkins was probably the worst of the season. But
Yeah.
there was another bad one in that one that prevented him from getting a touchdown. So unfortunate for Elijah Mitchell. And it's also worth noting that CMC, Christian McCaffrey, is also dealing with a little bit of knee irritation, which the team is going to monitor. So that doesn't sound like any serious, like probably again being extra cautious with Christian McCaffrey. Like they have big goals, but stuff these to keep an eye out in the next coming weeks.
And when it comes to filling in carries that Eli Mitchell's going to be, vacating, I think you have a better chance of seeing Debo Samuel getting an extra 3, 4 carries than having somebody else really popping out and seeing significant work, unless CMC happens to miss time with his injury. Or if Debo Samuel happens to miss another week with this hamstring that seems to be lingering on him, but he's still playing through. So I'm not really looking at the waiver wire when it comes to that, but it's something just to worth watching for at least both of them guys actually. But Eli Mitchell, sad to see he's going to be out for the remainder of the regular season. I'll move us on to the Los Angeles Rams, who will now be missing their new wide receiver one, Allen Robinson, for the rest of the season with a foot injury. As if there was anybody left in Los Angeles to play football. Allen Robinson now down. What are your thoughts, Cody?
Yeah, and we're just talking offense because that's mainly what's relevant to the fantasy side. But if you're in an IDP league, superstar Aaron Donald has a banged up ankle that he's getting second opinions on. So that never sounds good. And this team might just be getting ready to shut it down for the season. Like they're going to retool, reload up. Like I don't think they have a first round pick because
I
they
don't think they have
don't.
a
So
first round pick for the next 3 years. So
yeah, so it's not like they're playing for a better draft spot. But I wouldn't be surprised to see them, try to maybe get a better look at some of these young guys so you could be, building block long term, and then retool for next season and try to make another push for a Super Bowl.
yeah, just so you know, no first round pick in 2023. They have a 2, 3, a couple sixes, and a 7. 2024, they do finally have a first round pick again. So maybe they'll go
For
ahead and
now,
trade that first round pick for someone. Yeah, we're on the same page. I don't even have to keep talking. You got me. Chicago Bears. Now, we were really excited about their passing attack as Justin Fields started to get going. And of course, Justin Fields did not play this week, but he was pretty close. There's a chance he plays next week. But his top receiver, Darnell Mooney, is now expected to miss the rest of the season with an ankle injury. So it's a big blow for a team that was starting to turn the corner.
definitely um, a blow for them. I mean, Justin Fields, he was accelerating with his legs, no pun intended. Um, he was still struggling a little bit in the pass game, but Darnell Mooney had come on a little bit, became a matchup based or hope for a touchdown flex guy on an offense that was at least moving the ball. So it's a tough blow. At least they did add Chase Claypool. Um, at the deadline, he had a really nice catch over Sauce Gardner this past week. One of like the few Bears highlights from the week. So we'll see if maybe he gets an uptick in work. They can start to recuperate that second round pick that they sent. But I'll just hit through some other injuries because these guys, they're more day to day expected to play, or we're gonna have to see how things go. Um, Aaron Rodgers, ribs. He left the game. Jordan Love came in. He looked pretty good. Now they're doing more tests on Monday. We don't have the full results as the time of recording this, but Rodgers did say post game, as long as the Packers are mathematically still in, and according to ESPN, they have a 2% chance of making the playoffs after their loss in Philadelphia. He plans to play. So we'll see if Aaron Rodgers can go this week against the Bears on the team that he owns. Jamar Chase, another guy that we saw very close on Sunday, is expected to be back this week against the Kansas City Chiefs in an AFC championship matchup, or AFC conference championship rematch, I should say. Pretty interesting how the schedule worked for the Chiefs there. They went Titans, then Chiefs back to back weeks, just like they did in the playoffs this past season. Schedule makers always throwing in some potential storylines. And
Oh,
then
yeah.
running back news, Michael Carter, he left the game, I believe, early in the third quarter with an ankle injury. He is day to day. Travis Etienne, he left early in the first quarter, or early in the second, or late in the first. I can't remember. I don't have my timeline in front of me. Uh, but it sounds like that was more precaution, like he was good to go, but they wanted just to make sure there wasn't any extra swelling or anything that flares up after the adrenaline calmed down. Um, and he even said post game, quote, "I'll be straight next week." So you can look for Henry back. And then J.K. Dobbins is set to practice in some degree this week with his knee injury. So he could be back getting in the mix with Baltimore. And they can use him because their running game has not been the best, but J.K. Dobbins is struggling to stay healthy. So not sure how much of an impact that will play in terms of fantasy as well.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think I really have too much to add there. We're just going to talk about some more of these backfield situations, especially as we go through our waiver wire in a bit. But you mentioned a little quick quote in there. Why don't we hit a couple other quotes in the quotes of the week? Quotes of the week starting us off in Jacksonville, where the Jaguars had a great comeback victory over the Baltimore Ravens. Doug Peterson postgame talking about his quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, saying he was, quote, lights out in that comeback win. And honestly, I was very disappointed being somebody watching as a fan of Trevor Lawrence last year. It's amazing how much of a corner he's turned in year two under a coach who's good with quarterbacks and Doug Peterson. He has looked completely different this season than he did last. So props to Trevor Lawrence, and I agree with Doug Peterson on this one.
Yes, Trevor Lawrence. Honestly, you could argue that was a career-altering game for him. Now it was just
Mhm.
one game. He has looked, he's had some brighter moments, but they talk about Doug Peterson being a quarterback whisperer, a great quarterback coach, and you can start to see it here. And I know it's quotes of the week as well. So just to tie it in with the Jaguars safety Andrew Wingard, after the game, he was asked in his locker room. He was talking about how he was so happy for Trevor Lawrence because he had to deal with Urban Meyer last year. I don't even know if he had a rookie year. Like you just talked about his
Ooh.
his his rookie year, and like that team was in such a bad place with the hiring of Urban Meyer and what they went through. So if you look at it as this almost like that year didn't exist, and this is his true rookie year, there's a lot of signs of hope for the future. Um, and it seems like the Jags might have finally hit on a head coach, and they might finally be getting something out of Trevor Lawrence. So I'm excited for this Jags team. Don't forget, they traded for Calvin Ridley. They're going to get him into the mix next year with Christian Kirk and Zay Jones and Travis Etienne. Like, this team is definitely seems to be on the up and up.
100%. So now I'm going to move on to our second quote, which I'm actually going to shock Cody a little bit here. I'm going to throw one in that I didn't put on the rundown. This is Darius Slay following the Eagles game talking about rookie safety Reed Blankenship intercepting Aaron Rodgers. He said, quote, I'm low-key jealous too, I ain't going to lie, because he got Rodgers before I did, and I've been in the league for 10 years, in his division for 7. So that was something that's like I never thought of that. Like, Darius Slay, if you don't know, started his career on the Detroit Lions, played against the Packers twice a year. Reed Blankenship comes in 2 snaps on the defense in his entire career and intercepted Aaron Rodgers on like his second drive. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, it definitely was impressive. And I'm not trying to discredit anything from Reed Blankenship, but I do want to give a shout. Darius Slay, and George probably will appreciate that as an Eagles fan, might be one of the most underrated corners in his 10-year career. Mostly because he spent 7 years in Detroit, but that dude has been a lockdown corner. And even when like Aaron Rodgers and other guys talk about him, like Darius Slay is a guy they game plan for. Like they know they don't call him Big Play Slay for no reason. Like he is an elite guy. So that is high praise for the rookie. Now there was some debate, especially on the Packers side of it. Like if you watch the play, the tight end didn't keep running forward across the safety's face. He ran into the safety. They talked about after the game he was actually supposed to run a slot like up and be like get the safety once he started to bite up to run behind him and it's supposed to go over the top. So definitely some miscommunication there, but still your third play in the NFL picking off are we're not going to argue about it. The guy that doesn't throw interceptions at like he's
Yep.
the all-time touchdown to interception ratio. To get one on him, everybody talks about it. Uh, that's a big thing. You want to talk about the Eagles game, and I'm going to talk about Aaron Rodgers. He hasn't had the best season, but he's still held in a high regard. Even the word Jalen Hurts was asked about what it felt to get a win over Aaron Rodgers, which I always think is a weird question because like he doesn't play Aaron Rodgers at all. It's like
Mhm.
it's over the Packers. But he said I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but he did use the word "go," and he's like it's always good to get a win over the goat, and I hope that he has a speedy recovery because he did leave the game. And I think that is something that goes under. Even I talked about at the beginning of the season with Jalen Hurts. Um, he has such a mature nature about him,
Mhm.
which the way he talks, the way he presents himself, and the respect he has for the game and other people. Um, His team just had a big win against a team that, has been struggling, but they fought all 4 quarters. And then to still in that moment be appreciative to what he beating the Packers, going up against Aaron Rodgers, all that, but then to still give his respect for a guy that got hurt. You love to see that from any player, especially the young guy that has, we went into the season going, are the Eagles really going to give him a long term extension to how much is this going to cost the Eagles to retain him?
100% true. And I don't want to even add on to that. You wrapped that up perfectly. And we'll get off of the Eagles Packers talk now and have one more quote of the week coming from what Cody will call my favorite team, the LA Chargers, and their head coach, Brandon Staley, on the 2 point conversion play for the win over the Cardinals. And he called it, quote, smooth like chocolate milk. Now, Cody and I both debated before we recorded exactly what that means. Don't know 100% know, but I know like when you're on like warm summer day, like people are like a cold, soda hits different. Like there's some times where chocolate milk just hits different too. So I'm assuming that's where he's coming from.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. Like, I think George is probably right. I didn't know if it was like the play design, Gerald Everett's route, but I think he was just going into that emotion, that feel. The cold beer on a hot summer day, the hot chocolate by the fire on a cold day. Like
Mhm.
sometimes the drinks just hit differently, and once you get that nice ice cold glass of chocolate milk, it hits differently. So I think that's what it meant. And props to the Chargers, and we talked about Doug Peterson for going for it for two. And I'm going to bring the Packers back into it. If they were to cover the onside kick, I just want you to know, I would have been probably, I don't know the right word to say, annoying. It's not the best way to put it, but if Jordan Love would have brought a comeback and went for two to win the game in Philadelphia, I would have told you we just found the next Aaron Rodgers, and we're going back to the Super Bowl with Jordan Love. So, but props to coaches for all that to say. Props to coaches for going for two, because we always say if you play scared, if you play to lose, you play scared, or you play to play for overtime. You don't play for the win. You play to lose. You end up losing. So I love the aggressiveness that we're seeing out of these guys, because they have trickle down effects for the rest of the season.
And they can have trickle down effects in the wrong way too. Let's not forget that. Like the Baltimore Ravens had this situation twice last year, failed both times, and then their season fell apart. So it's not like this is a gimme. Oh, you definitely go for two, you're gonna get it. Like it doesn't always work that way. But especially for the Jaguars who are almost out of it in a way, and they're just kind of like, we're gonna go out there and get a W. Or the Chargers, who are a team that's been struggling, looking for a spark, and that might be the spark they need to turn their season around. Great calls for that. The Packers would have fell into that same situation. So I get you.
For sure. But that wraps up quotes of the week. So let's jump into week 13 waiver wire.
As always, you can check out thecouchgms.com and check out my waiver wire column where I highlight some of the top guys to add for the week. So I'm going to go ahead and run them down, and then Cody and I can debate on a couple if we would like to, and then we'll give you a couple of others not on the article to talk about who might be some guys to add as some speculative or maybe some guys I missed. So on thecouchgms.com, I highlight Jared Goff, who is my streaming quarterback of the week. Gus Edwards for Baltimore, who we don't exactly know what's going to go on with J.K. Dobbins, but he is a bell cow back who's only 16% owned at this point. Kyron Williams for the Rams, where the Rams backfield's been a mess, but he is the leader in that backfield right now, and there's not many weapons. Traylon Burks makes a return appearance here as he was only added in about 13% of leagues compared to last week, and then again had another 15-point week, maybe partly thanks to a fumble recovery touchdown, but that's another point. Donovan Peoples-Jones also returned. We kind of talked about that Cleveland Browns situation already, so I'm sure Cody and I'll have a little bit to talk about here. Zay Jones for the Jaguars, who I mentioned this on the article, but like there's a very love-hate relationship with Zay Jones, I think, through all of us. But if you're going to target him 24 times in 2 games, you kind of have to own him, I think, at this point. And then Foster Moreau, who is very touchdown dependent, but at tight end, that's about all you can ask for the Raiders as he's filling in for Darren Waller. Is there anyone you want to touch on here first, or you want to move us on to the rest?
Yeah, I'll talk about the quarterback Jared Goff because he's looked good. He's had his up and down games, but I mentioned this last week in the Start Sit article. Um, this isn't the Jaguars' defense that got him to the AFC Championship game, but it's also not the Jacksonville Jaguars defense that we saw the last 2 seasons. Like they're starting to come around. They're starting to play, pretty well. I don't have the number in front of me, but maybe George, you can look it up real quick for me. What Lamar Jackson finished with, but I don't think he had a huge day as well. Um, so that,
He did. He actually still had 23.06 in a standard quarterback scoring league. So
but how much of that was with his legs? Because he had a rushing touchdown.
he did have 89 on the ground. So that is a good point. He had
Did it,
254 and a touchdown in the air and 14 rushes for 89.
yeah.
So,
So a lot of that was through the ground. So it's not like I'm not. We don't expect that from Jared Goff. So when you're out
mhm.
there, I mean, I know we're back with teams on bye this week, with the Cardinals and the Panthers. So you're not looking to replace Sam Darnold, but you probably are looking to replace um, Kyler Murray if you can. Jared Goff, he's at least done it before. Um, and it's not the best matchup, but there's not a lot of great streaming options out there. So unless you could end up getting a guy. Actually, I'm just gonna ask you this question:
Okay.
Jared Goff or Deshaun Watson against the Texans?
I'm going Jared Goff just because, like you said, he's done it before, and Deshaun Watson is, coming back from a year and a half hiatus. But it could end up being a coin flip too. I would lean Goff though. I like the familiarity.
All right, Jared Goff or um, Jimmy G against the Dolphins.
I'm going Jimmy G there. I know he's a much more widely owned quarterback, but he's been super consistent despite looking like he's like quarterback 19 so far.
Right, I know. Obviously, we normally do this on the Thursday episode, but my last one: Jared Goff or Tom Brady against the Saints, regular season Saints, that is.
Um, part of me says I have to say Goff because Brady struggles against the Saints. So, um, I'll go Goff. Why not?
All right, so yeah, that right. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think it's like a home run stream of the week, but there isn't a lot of options this week. So I did
Yes.
like Jared Goff. And then Rams running back Kyron Williams, he looked the best of
Mhm.
you know everybody out there. With that said, the Rams looked abysmal for most of the game.
Yep.
So he's like on the list of guys. Like, if you can go get Traylon Burks, I'd rather do that. If I could go get
Mhm.
Gus Edwards, I'd rather do that. Kyron Williams might be a nice ad. Uh, if maybe you had Elijah Mitchell, so you already have a roster spot and you have a later waiver wire, but he's not one of those guys that I would say is a must add this week type of player.
Oh, 100%. He's on here because I do think he is in the top 7 or 8 guys to add, but he's probably somewhere down near the bottom of that 7 to 8. He's almost falling into a similar situation as Isaiah Pacheco was when I had him on this list for so many weeks. Like if he's going to get volume, you kind of want to roster him because there's a potential for a breakout, or guys with that much volume shouldn't just be sitting on the waiver wire. You have a chance to flex him if you end up being super desperate, knowing that there's going to be opportunity, but you don't want to play him if you can help it, especially before any kind of breakout.
For sure. George, is there any other guys? I know you did the whole article, but is there any other guys on your list you wanted to hype up, or do you want to just jump into some other names?
Um, I mean, I think the best guy on the list is Traylon Burks, which you kind of talked about, and we did talk about the Donovan Peoples Jones thing a little bit. I'll touch on Zay Jones for half a second because I think there were so many times where if people listen to us, they might have a negative connotation of Zay Jones. I still personally do myself too. Um, but the Jaguars, like, if they're going to go out there and ball out, and if they have some good matchups coming up, somebody's going to have to take the targets alongside of Christian Kirk. Or if teams are going to bracket out Christian Kirk, somebody's got to get those targets. Evan Ingram has not proven to be someone who can do it on a consistent basis, which then leaves Zay Jones as your next best option. Marvin Jones hasn't really done too much of that either. So this is on here, like I said earlier, because of targets. And maybe he'll start to get more attention from defenses, and this won't be something that's relevant, but we don't really know that in advance. As of now, He's a potential flex based on matchup, which is why he's on this list. And the waiver wire, as you know, as you get further into the season, kind of gets lighter and lighter. So that's why guys like this end up being someone who you can stash on your bench. And you're looking for guys who can play in a pinch and potentially get you like a 10, 12 point game.
Right, and it is worth noting that he gets the Lions this week, who are currently 30th against fantasy wide receivers, and then the Titans the following week, they're currently 31st. So prime matchups, which is I think a great reason why you could pick him up and stash or hope or maybe even prevent. It's also worth noting too, there is a gamemanship about this, and uh, look no further than last week with the Cardinals playing on Monday Night Football and Kyler Murray questionable. I know at least two people in two different leagues that had Kyler Murray that rolled the dice because Colt McCoy was still available in free agency,
Mm-hmm.
but their opponent picked up Colt McCoy before the game,
Ooh,
before it was announced, and then they were stuck with no quarterback. So there is some gamemanship here
yeah.
too. So like if you're looking ahead, and when you're doing waivers, you should look ahead not just your team, but your potential opponent. You look ahead, and you might not need anything for this week, but you see that your opponent has two receivers on bye, and one of his bench guys are kind of hurt or something like that. Maybe target the top wide receiver. Try to jump him. Just play a little bit of addition, or I guess that'd be addition by subtraction, but that might not be the best way to say that. But just help yourself out by doing the gamemanship of fantasy football. To sometimes it pays off. We're talking Zay Jones and Donovan Peoples-Jones. There might not be a huge disparity. You might end up with one, and he might get the guy that you thought was less, and he has a bigger week because that's just fantasy football. But now that there is only 2 weeks, teams on bye this week. So if you have the ability, like you can also pick guys that might not help you in your lineup, but will help you by not being in your opponent's lineup.
It's funny you mentioned the Kyler Murray thing because I actually did something similar at facing Kyler Murray in a league that week where I picked up Derek Carr, making him forced to be left with Colt McCoy. So similar situation. But yeah, it never hurts to look at your opponent this week and be like, huh, maybe this will help him because you'd pick him up and start him right away. Then you go ahead and take that guy from him. That's a good point. But we have a couple of guys who maybe are a little more widely owned that we have to talk about as additional guys on the waiver wire. I had a lot of guys named Watson this week. Christian Watson for the Green Bay Packers, who's 66.4% owned, and Deshaun Watson, who we mentioned earlier, for the Cleveland Browns, 58.4% owned. I'll let you talk about Christian Watson a little bit here because you are the resident Packers fan.
Sure, I will definitely be happy with that. I do want to throw one other guy's name on this list. He's over 50% owned, but that is Latavius Murray. Now, the Broncos' offense
Mm-hmm.
is awful, but he dominated the carries. He had 90 yards on the ground. He didn't find the end zone, which is what you're going to have to worry about with, but he saw 15, I believe, maybe 14 attempts. So make sure he's out there. He could be a nice, RB2 fill-in guy, especially for the playoff run. Now that he is the lead guy there, but Christian Watson, and I'm going to get your thoughts on this too. He has gone from being a nobody, dealing with injuries. I don't want to. That sounded very harsh, but dealing with injuries, not being a very big part of the offense. And over the last 3 weeks, he's had 6 touchdowns. He's had at least 200-yard games, or I can't. I don't think he had quite 100 yards against the Titans. Um, he has more touchdowns now than guys like Tyreek Hill. I believe he has more touchdowns than Justin Jefferson, like some of those elite guys. But are you at all worried about the small sample size with Christian Watson? Like, obviously the trade deadline has passed. Like, I feel like this would be like a sell high candidate if it wasn't. But then you also have Aaron Rodgers coming out and saying he's a reliable big play threat. And when Aaron Rodgers calls a receiver reliable, it has to make eyebrows go up because one of the big knocking points that people, it's like they don't throw to young receivers. And Christian Watson does make enough plays where, let's be honest, he's the top wide receiver. He should be. Like, Alan Lazard's still going to get his, Randall Cobb's going to get his, but Christian Watson should be the top target in Green Bay rest of season.
So yeah, first off, he did not get 100 yards against Tennessee. Actually, only got 48, but the 2 touchdowns. I'm not as worried about the small sample size as much as I am worried about people are going to be disappointed when he finally doesn't score that touchdown. He can go in next week to Chicago, not score a touchdown, still have 10 points, and people are going to be like, well, Christian Watson's done. It might work out well for you because then, I mean, he's going into a week 14 bye. He might actually see his own percentage go down, and he's somebody you can snatch off the waiver wire for for the fantasy playoffs. But I think he's done enough damage that even if it ends up being Jordan Love at quarterback because they decide to sit down Aaron Rodgers if they get eliminated or if Aaron Rodgers misses time due to the injury, Christian Watson is somebody who I think has earned a role in the offense. He's going to see his 6 to 10 targets per game. He is a big play threat, so he can score that touchdown any play, but he's going to be somebody who's reliable enough that even if you're not confident enough playing him every single week, matchup based at least, he is worth it to play.
For sure. We saw he took a 10-yard slant, 63 yards to the house. So, he
Exactly.
has that big play ability. And you mentioned the Packers on bye next week, and again, if none of these guys are like I really need to pick them up. The NFL hates fantasy football because the
Mhm.
final week of the fantasy football season, as teams are playing to get in, we have 6 teams on bye. So not
Yep.
this week, but in week 14, there are 6 teams on bye. So use this week, the waiver wire, to go out and pick up replacements for people that are on bye. Like, look at your defense. If you have, you know, the Saints defense or the Commanders defense or the Packers defense or the Bears, because their defense has played pretty well outside of this past week. Like, if you were relying on them, like, go ahead and pick up the streaming option the week this week and hold them for a week to get another um, advantage on your opponent, especially if you're in like the win to get in scenario. Like, obviously you have to win this week, and you don't want to. Even NFL players, like, you start looking ahead, you get beat. In
Mhm.
fantasy, it's not that big of a deal because you don't control how the players play on the field, so it is more pertinent to look ahead a little bit. Um, and knowing that the big buys loom after a week of no buys and just 2 teams, like, start preparing a little bit for that as well.
100%. It's always about not just looking at this week, it's looking ahead as well, especially getting into the fantasy playoffs. We got a couple other guys to talk about on the waiver wire. And first off, we're going to go to the New York Jets backfield, where we have 2 guys that are potential ads, especially if Michael Carter ends up missing time. First off, James Robinson, who is a healthy scratch this week, but I have a feeling that he's going to be somebody who can get activated and potentially involved if Michael Carter does not go. And then there's the exciting rookie Zonovan White, who also might be on your fantasy platform as Bam White, who is less than 0.1% owned. He had a fantastic week this past week, scoring, I believe it was 14 and a half PPR points. And he's somebody who the Jets seem to be excited about. And they're not afraid to play rookies in New York. They're talking about how much these rookies are, they were blowing up for this team. So I would not be shocked also if he even starts getting some work despite who else is left in that backfield if he keeps balling out like he is.
Yeah, I think Zonovan White is, he would probably be the guy I would add. But I think, James Robinson was a healthy scratch, and George and I were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. Think back to last year, right around this time, Miles Sanders gets hurt. Everybody and their brother thinks it's going to be Boston Scott.
Mhm.
It wasn't. Boston Scott threw up a goose egg. They activated Jordan Howard off the practice squad, and it was Jordan Howard that led the team in, attempts. He got the touchdowns. So, like, they traded for James Robinson. So I wouldn't be surprised, but the guy with the bigger upside, I think, is Zonovan White. But just see what happens. Pay attention to whether it's us on Twitter, your NFL pregame shows to see if James Robinson is activated. Again, this is barring Michael Carter doesn't go. We should know more information on our next episode. But there is potential that the running back order shakes up a little bit in New York. Um, but speaking of injuries, we talked about Darnell Mooney as well. Chase Claypool, he's another guy. I think he's a little bit tied. Actually, let me ask you this:
Okay.
if it's Trevor Simeon,
Mhm.
do you like Claypool more than you do with Justin Fields?
Um, I get where this question comes from because obviously we would think Trevor Siemian actually might even have a better arm than Justin Fields. Justin Fields is doing all of this work with his legs, but I think I actually like Claypool better with Justin Fields. He's had a few weeks to get like going with him. He hasn't really done anything impressive. It's like one catch a game kind of deal. But now that he would be the wide receiver one, and like who else is in that wide receiver room? What Equinemius St. Brown, and then a couple other guys who I cannot think of or probably even know. Um, Even though it's Justin Fields throwing the ball, the points have to go to somewhere. Chase Claypool has to get some kind of a bump by going up the depth chart to wide receiver one. So I think I like that better than Trevor Siemian. But I don't know if I even love him that much regardless.
I got you. Yeah. Um, Not a guy that you have to run out to get, but it's just, as you're playing injuries. And the same thing goes for the Rams wide receivers. Like if you were holding out hope for the Allen Robinson to replace Cooper Cup. It didn't go as we had hoped. He's now hurt. And with Matt Stafford out, the running back's a mess, the offensive line a mess. I don't think you're running out to get a 2-2 Atwell. Um, or the dude, I would not pronounce his name, Ben's something,
Skoronic.
that
Skoronic.
guy. Um, so yeah, the Rams are in the same situation. Like I see that there's another injury, but it's just past the point where any of them are worth holding on your roster. Um, but
Van
we did
Jefferson is the only one that's even borderline, and he's super touchdown dependent.
right. I even forgot he was there, to be honest with you. And
It
that's
shows you how well he's been doing despite the Cooper
yeah,
Cup injury and
and
everything
he
else.
was a super talented option coming up.
Oh
So
yeah.
um, and if Matt Stafford would come back and play, maybe that gives an uptick for Van Jefferson. Um,
Hmm.
but as long as it's Bryce Perkins or John Wolford, whoever is back there, I don't
Hmm.
think I'm trusting any of the Rams wide receivers. And then the last name before we get into the TNF preview, Jordan Mason. Now you did talk about how Debo Samuel, as long as the hamstring checks out, might get the upticks in the run game, get some of the Elijah Mitchell carries. But there was some hype around Jordan Mason at the preseason. Um, you know, they still have had Davis Price healthy scratches, inactive most of the season. If you're the Christian McCaffrey owner on this team, is how well they get running backs to go. I might go pick up Jordan Mason to
Hmm.
handcuff because Elijah Mitchell's still there. Like obviously, Debo Samuel started some work. But he's dealing with a hamstring, and we saw him miss some time. He did come back to the game, but they're still working him back, and they're going to want to make a run at the playoffs, so they might not want to let him be the running back until we get into the playoffs. So Jordan Mason is a guy that I think we talked about on last week's show, handcuffs, and I think he gets added to the list as a guy you should go add.
100% agree with you. I don't have anything else to add there for the 49ers as well. So I think that can wrap up the week 13 waiver wire and while we look ahead to week 14 with a little Thursday night preview. Thursday night football. Oh, I'm going to wait. Thursday night football in week 14. All right, week 13. I mixed up the weeks so bad, I think there. Week 13 Thursday night football features the Buffalo Bills and the New England Patriots. The Patriot side of the ball, I should say, we have some injuries to deal with. So I'm just going to start there and give a little rundown. So they are not coming off of a short week. They did play on Thanksgiving. But they do have some guys who are a little banged up. Damian Harris did not practice on Monday and is not expected to play in this Thursday night game. A little bit of another boost for Ramondre Stevenson. Not that he even really needed it. He's been dominating those carries regardless. And then their wide receiver room, Jacoby Myers and Devontae Parker are both limited participants, but it looks like they're both going to be good to go. So it's a tough matchup against the Bills. So we got Ramondre Stevenson locked in. Where else are you even looking on this Patriots team, if anywhere?
Probably nowhere. I mean, Mac Jones didn't have a terrible day. I don't really want to stream Mac Jones.
No, definitely. No, there's
Not against.
probably 16 other quarterbacks I would say I'd play instead of Mac Jones. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not gonna buy into the decent game he had against the Minnesota Vikings, um, where he actually looked pretty good for parts of that game. So yeah, I'm pretty much stuck at Ramondre Stevenson, especially with the injuries to the wide receivers. There's not another guy like I'm not going to. I think Aguilar is still there. I don't believe
Aguilar
I'm missing.
actually, yeah, he scored a touchdown last week. He's on some people's waiver wires, and I don't understand that one. Actually, the person I want to talk to you about, potential dartboard candidate, Hunter Henry, has been scoring some touchdowns again lately. I mean, against the Bills, I think I'm holding back from that. I know how you feel about playing dartboard tight ends on a Thursday, but any thought?
Um, yeah, I don't love doing it, but if I was gonna pick a dartboard throw, um, Hunter Henry might not be a bad option if like all like if Myers and Parker both go, they have Aguilar, maybe not, but if one of them is held back or even both because it is a short week, just because somebody will have to catch the ball. Um, might not be a bad option. But we saw the Buffalo Bills. Granted, the weather is not supposed to be like what it was in Buffalo in that game, but we saw the Patriots beat them last year in a game where they just ran the ball over and over and over again. And I think they might try to recreate that in some capacity. They won't be able to do it the same way because the Buffalo Bills should be able to score points. Um, but it's divisional. These games are weird as it is. So would not be surprised. Like if this game finished, 23-13 or 23-17, would not be surprised. And then, thinking about that probably means it was a shorter game, a lot of running, and holding the Bills to 23 points is a feat in itself. So, um, I think this game could be a little bit low scoring. So that's probably another reason I would probably pivot off Hunter Henry. Unless you're in like a 14-man league, you might not have a choice.
So Cody's saying to go add Pierre Strong Jr. and play him because they're going to run the ball a bazillion times. Just kidding. Don't actually do that. Um, but I'm with you. There's not really many options on the Patriots side, but on the flip side, maybe there's more options on the Bills side. The Patriots do also, like we say, have a tough defense, so it's not exactly the easiest matchup for the Bills. My first question is actually going to take me to Isaiah McKenzie because he's somebody who I think people really want to love. Every single time he shows a flash, everyone is buying in, like, everyone go get Isaiah McKenzie. And then the next 3 weeks he does nothing, and then he has another touchdown or two touchdown game, and everyone gets on the bandwagon again. Like, I'm someone who's staying off of that. But is that just me being tired of the roller coaster, or is there something actually here in a matchup against the Patriots?
I don't think there's. I don't think there's anything truly there, and I think we've kind of seen that too with Gabriel Davis. Maybe the dips aren't as low on his roller coaster, but he hasn't been that consistent number two solid every week starter option that we hoped for coming into the season. Like we talked about it all, this whole season. Like last year, like Gabe Davis was startable most weeks. Cole Beasley, he was startable. You had Stephon Diggs. They lost Beasley. We were thinking, you know, Jamison Crowder, Isaiah McKenzie. Crowder gets hurt. Like we're like, okay, these are the three. Like we were starting three Bills last week on a regular basis, and it's not like the Bills have taken a step back, but it seems to be a lot more funneled through Stephon Diggs. And then is it a Gabe Davis week or is it a McKenzie week?
Mm-hmm.
And there hasn't been that level of consistency that we've hoped for. So um, the Patriots are notorious though for taking away the number one option and having the number two beat you. Um, so I still think you play Gabe Davis this week, but against the Patriots defense, I probably would go all the way to Isaiah McKenzie.
And we say that as the Patriots gave up a bazillion points to Justin Jefferson last week, too. So it's not like it always works. But I
Correct.
think for that reason, though, because they probably will try to bracket someone like a Stephon Diggs, I wouldn't go as far as McKenzie, but I think I would also throw Dawson Knox on the tight end dartboard.
All right, Dawson Knox or Hunter Henry, which Thursday night football are you picking?
I'm probably going with Dawson Knox, but it is literally a coin flip.
All right, I'll go Hunter Henry just to
So you go on to the internet and you search for, what do you search for your wheel?
wheel of names.
Okay. And then
That's
you
what it's.
put both names in and you spin it, and whatever one it lands on, you play the opposite one because it never actually works. Um,
Or does it? We've just caught on. Uh, but I think we're getting a little carried away with this matchup. It's pretty straightforward on who you're going to play. But I do have to say, I think that wraps up our episode. Hopefully you made it through. Hopefully you could put up with my congested voice. Again, we hope you had a great Thanksgiving. We are definitely very thankful for all the listeners we have, and uh, we probably still do this if nobody listened, but it definitely gives us some more confidence that we know that there are people out there listening to us. And we'd love for you to get more involved with that said. So whether that's just shooting us a DM. We have people, ask us each week, give us our, I have these three players. Which one would you pick? Like, we'd love to be a part of that conversation. We'd love to talk ball with you. So make sure you get involved because, Tyler's not here, but he would definitely tell you this podcast is more fun for us and more fun for you when you get involved.
Yes, Cody, and thank you all one more time for listening into the Couch GMs podcast. For Cody Roadcap, I'm George Kurth, and we'll see y'all later this week.